The neighborhood of Maplewood had a rhythm that never changed. Lawns were trimmed on Sundays, sprinklers clicked to life before sunrise, and porch lights flicked on at exactly 8 o'clock every night. People left their doors unlocked and their windows open because nothing bad ever happened there. It was the kind of place where people smiled at each other across driveways, where kids biked until dusk and parents gossiped over coffee. That was until the night everything changed. The night the Mitchells' kitchen turned into a crime scene, and the name Emma Collins would never sound the same again. Emma had always seemed like the perfect girl. She was 17, soft-spoken, responsible, the kind of teenager parents adored. Her long brown hair was always tied neatly in a ponytail. Her clothes modest and clean. She never missed school, never talked back, and always said please and thank you. When she babysat, she'd tidy the living room, leave handwritten notes about how the kids behaved, and sometimes bake cookies as a surprise. The Mitchells trusted her more than anyone. She had been babysitting their 6-year-old son Noah for almost a year. Noah loved her like an older sister. He would run into her arms every time she came through the door. That Friday night began like any other. The sky was gray, heavy with rain that threatened to fall but never quite did. The smell of wet grass hung in the air as thunder rumbled far away. Claire Mitchell had a dinner reservation downtown with a few friends. Nothing unusual, just a chance to unwind. Tom Mitchell, her husband, was supposedly working late again, though Claire had started to wonder about that lately. He'd been distant, distracted, coming home later than usual. She told herself it was stress, that it wasn't worth fighting about, but something in her gut didn't feel right. Emma arrived at 6 sharp, umbrella in hand, smiling as always. Claire greeted her warmly, relieved to see her dependable babysitter. "Thank you, Emma, he's already had dinner. Just let him watch one movie before bed, okay?" Emma nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Mitchell, don't worry about a thing." She said it like she always did, calm and confident. But if Claire had looked a little closer, she might have noticed something off. A flicker in Emma's eyes, a tightness in her smile. After giving Noah a quick hug and saying goodbye, Claire left. The house grew quiet except for the sound of rain finally beginning to fall against the windows. Noah picked his favorite movie, a cartoon he'd seen 100 times, and curled up under a blanket on the couch. Emma sat beside him, her eyes fixed on the screen but her thoughts far away. She wasn't thinking about cartoons or bedtime. She was thinking about Claire, about how unfair everything was, how perfect Claire's life seemed. The husband, the house, the family, things Emma believed she deserved more. By 8 o'clock, Noah was asleep. Emma carried him gently to his room, tucked him in, and stood for a moment watching him breathe. She had always loved the quiet of the house when everyone else was asleep. It made her feel powerful somehow, like she was part of their world in a way they didn't understand. But that night her heart felt different, faster, heavier. There was a storm outside, but the real storm was building inside her. Around 9, headlights swept across the living room wall. Claire was home earlier than expected. Emma froze for a moment, startled. She hadn't planned for that. Claire walked into the house shaking rain from her hair, her phone still in her hand. "Hey, Emma?" she called softly. "Everything okay?" Her voice carried that same warmth, that same trust. Emma forced a smile as she appeared from the hallway. "Yes, Mrs. Mitchell, Noah's asleep." Claire nodded and set her purse down. Then her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen and something changed in her expression. Her smile faded. Her eyes darted toward Emma for just a second before she turned away, typing quickly. "Sorry," she muttered. "It's just Tom." She didn't see the way Emma's hands clenched or the way her jaw tightened. Claire's next words were soft but cutting. "He says he's working late, but I think he's lying." She gave a small, bitter laugh, unaware that the girl standing a few feet away knew more about Tom's lies than she ever would. Emma's chest burned. Her mind flashed with memories. Tom's hands on hers, his promises, his words. "You're different, Emma. You make me feel alive." He had told her he loved her. He had told her he was leaving his wife. But that hadn't happened. It never did. And now, standing in that kitchen watching Claire complain about him, something inside Emma cracked. Claire finally put her phone down and turned back to Emma. "Sorry about that. Men, right?" She smiled awkwardly. "Anyway, thank you again. You're such a good kid. I don't know what we'd do without you." Those words, the kindest words, landed like a knife. A good kid. That's all she was to them. A helper, a shadow. Not someone to love, not someone who mattered. Emma forced a smile, but her eyes were glassy. "You're welcome," she whispered. Claire moved toward the counter, humming as she opened a drawer to put something away. That's when Emma noticed the knife block. Sleek, polished steel reflecting the dim light. For a moment she just stared at it, hearing nothing but her own heartbeat. The rain outside grew louder, beating against the windows like a drum. Something primal, something she couldn't explain, took over her. She stepped closer. What happened next lasted seconds but would echo in that neighborhood for years. A scream, a crash, the sound of shattering glass. Then silence. When the storm cleared an hour later, Maplewood slept peacefully, unaware that one of their own lay lifeless on the kitchen floor. At exactly 11:14 p.m., the first call came in. A neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Green, reported hearing crying from next door. "I think something's wrong at the Mitchell's place," she said shakily. "I heard the boy crying and I don't know. It just sounded bad." Minutes later, red and blue lights flooded the quiet street. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the wind. Inside, the scene was hauntingly calm. The TV still played softly in the background, the cartoon credits looping. The smell of cookies still hung in the air. On the couch, little Noah sat clutching his blanket, tears streaking his cheeks. "Emma," he whimpered. "Where's Mommy?" But Emma was gone. The back door was open, rain blowing in through the screen. On the kitchen floor lay Claire Mitchell, a dark pool spreading beneath her, her lifeless hand stretched toward the phone that had fallen beside her. The screen glowed faintly with the last message she'd ever sent. "She knows." Detective Ryan Hale arrived 20 minutes later, his raincoat dripping as he stepped carefully over the threshold. He'd seen dozens of crime scenes before, but something about this one felt off. It wasn't just the brutality. It was the quiet, the stillness, as if the house itself was holding its breath. He glanced at the little boy, trembling under a blanket, and then at the empty space near the back door. "Where's the babysitter?" he asked softly. No one had an answer. Outside, the storm began to fade, the first hint of dawn creeping over the horizon. Maplewood would soon wake to the news that their perfect little town wasn't so perfect after all. Somewhere out there, a 17-year-old girl with blood on her hands was running from the life she'd just destroyed. And for the first time, people would start to wonder if they'd ever really known the sweet, smiling girl next door. Detective Ryan Hale stood in the Mitchell's kitchen as the rain continued to pound against the windows. It was just past midnight, but the house felt frozen in time. Everything was in its place. The toys in the living room basket, the dishes stacked neatly, the family photos lining the walls. But that stillness only made the horror worse. The crime scene technicians moved quietly, snapping photos, collecting samples, whispering to each other in low voices. Ryan watched as they carefully zipped Claire Mitchell's body into a black bag. She had been stabbed once, cleanly and deliberately. Whoever did it wasn't panicked. They knew exactly what they were doing. He turned his attention to the phone still on the floor. The last text message glowed faintly on the cracked screen. "She knows." Ryan frowned. She knows what? And who was she talking about? He ordered the phone bagged for evidence, but the message kept replaying in his mind. Claire must have realized something just before she died. Something big enough to make her send that text. Upstairs, a young officer sat with Noah Mitchell. The little boy was wrapped in a blanket, his eyes puffy from crying. "She's gone," he kept saying softly. Emma went outside. Mommy was mad. Ryan knelt beside him, his voice calm and gentle. Do you remember when Emma went outside, buddy? Noah nodded. After Mommy yelled, she cried. Then Emma ran. Ryan's stomach twisted. That didn't sound like a random intruder. This was personal. By dawn, the news had already spread. Maplewood woke up to flashing lights and police tape. Neighbors gathered on porches, whispering into their coffee mugs, their faces pale. Nobody could believe it. Claire Mitchell was loved by everyone. She volunteered at the elementary school, baked cookies for every fundraiser, hosted block parties in her backyard. And Emma Collins, the quiet, polite babysitter, she was missing. Gone without a trace. Ryan started with the basics. He drove to the Collins house just 3 streets over. Emma's mother, Diane, answered the door looking confused and terrified. Is this about the Mitchells? She asked immediately. Her hands shook as she gripped the doorknob. Ryan nodded. We need to talk about your daughter. Diane's face crumpled. She didn't come home last night. I thought maybe she stayed there because of the storm. What happened? When Ryan told her, she gasped and stumbled backward. No, she wouldn't. She loved that boy. She wouldn't hurt anyone. But as the hours passed, the evidence began to build in ways that made denial harder to hold on to. Emma's purse was missing. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her car, a small silver Honda, was later found abandoned near Willow Lake, about 5 miles from town. The keys were still in the ignition. Inside the car, police found her backpack, her wallet, and a half-eaten candy bar. But there was no sign of Emma herself. Ryan stared at the car for a long time, the rain turning to mist around him. He had seen runaways before, but something about this didn't fit. If she had run, why leave everything behind? Why drive to the middle of nowhere in the middle of a storm? And what exactly had happened inside that house between her and Claire? He decided to talk to Tom Mitchell next. The husband had arrived at the crime scene hours later, wild-eyed and trembling. What happened? He'd kept asking, his voice breaking. Now sitting across from Ryan at the station, his grief seemed real. But there was something about his body language that didn't sit right. He couldn't meet Ryan's eyes. When was the last time you talked to your wife? Ryan asked. Tom rubbed his face. I called her around 8. Told her I'd be working late. Were you? Yes, Tom said quickly. I was at the office. Anyone who can confirm that? Ryan's tone was neutral, but the question made Tom flinch. My assistant left early, he said after a pause. I was alone. Ryan leaned back, studying him. Did your wife ever mention being suspicious about anything? Anyone she didn't trust? Tom hesitated. She said Emma had been acting strange lately. A little clingy. That word hung in the air, clingy. Ryan wrote it down slowly. What do you mean by that? Tom sighed and looked away. She called a lot. Stopped by when she wasn't scheduled to babysit. I thought it was just teenage stuff, you know? Maybe she was lonely. Ryan's mind started connecting dots. Claire's text. The emotional tone of the crime. The missing babysitter. Was there anything inappropriate between you and Emma? Tom's head snapped up. What? No. Of course not. But his face said otherwise. A flicker of something, guilt, maybe fear, crossed his eyes. And that was enough for Ryan to know there was more to this story. Later that afternoon, Ryan went back to the Mitchells' house with a search warrant. The team combed through the place again, this time looking for anything that connected Emma to the family beyond babysitting. In the guest room closet, behind a box of Christmas decorations, they found something strange. A small pink hairbrush, a perfume bottle, and a sweater that didn't belong to Claire. All of them had Emma's initials stitched inside. Ryan stood there staring at the items as realization settled in. Emma had been staying there, maybe secretly, maybe even with Tom. This wasn't just a murder. It was an explosion of lies that had been building for months. The discovery changed everything. Ryan had the phone records pulled for both Tom and Emma. Late-night calls, dozens of them. messages filled with affection, photos. Then, a week before the murder, the tone changed. Tom had stopped replying. Emma had sent one final message. "If you don't tell her, I will." Ryan exhaled slowly. So that's what Claire meant by "she knows." She must have found out that night, and that confrontation had ended in blood. Meanwhile, the search for Emma intensified. Helicopters swept over the woods near Willow Lake, and divers combed through the dark water. They found footprints leading from the edge of the lake into the trees, small and bare, matching her shoe size. But no body, no phone, no trace of where she went next. The media devoured the story. Babysitter gone rogue, Suburban murder mystery, the Maplewood affair. Every channel had a name for it. Neighbors who once praised Emma now called her a monster. Parents deleted her number from their phones. The once quiet town was now a circus of reporters and flashing cameras. But Ryan wasn't ready to declare her guilty just yet. Something about the timeline bothered him. If Emma had killed Claire in a fit of rage, why not take Noah? Why leave him unharmed? And why drive her car to the lake if she meant to disappear? None of it added up. That evening, Ryan sat alone in his office replaying the details. The phone buzzed. It was the forensic team. "Detective Hale, we found something in the Mitchells' kitchen drawer. It's a letter addressed to Claire." He frowned. "A letter?" "Yes, sir. From Emma. Unsent." When Ryan read it later, his suspicions deepened. The letter wasn't angry, it was pleading. Emma had written about feeling used, about how Tom promised things he never meant. She wrote, "I thought love made everything okay. I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted you to understand." Ryan stared at those words, realizing this wasn't a cold-blooded killer's voice. It was a desperate girl's confession of heartbreak. Still, heartbreak didn't explain the precision of the wound or the missing murder weapon. By midnight, the storm had passed and the town had gone eerily quiet again. Ryan drove out to Willow Lake, parking near where Emma's car had been found. The moonlight reflected off the water, and the air was heavy with the smell of pine and wet earth. He walked along the edge, flashlight cutting through the mist. He imagined Emma standing there, drenched, alone, maybe crying. Did she jump? Or did someone help her vanish? He found fresh cigarette butts near the water, 2 of them, and muddy footprints that didn't match Emma's. Someone else had been there that night. Someone watching her. Ryan crouched by the water's edge, the reflection of his flashlight trembling across the ripples. The puzzle was far from solved, but one thing was certain. Emma Collins wasn't just missing. She was running from something, or someone, who wanted to make sure the truth stayed buried beneath the surface of Maplewood's perfect little town. It was the 3rd week after the murder when the break finally came. For days, the search teams had combed every inch of the woods near Willow Lake, but they were starting to lose hope. The weather had turned colder, the leaves browning and curling along the roadside. Reporters had moved on to other stories, and the neighborhood began to sink back into uneasy silence. Yet Detective Ryan Hale couldn't shake the feeling that the answers were still out there, somewhere close, waiting to be uncovered. On a misty Thursday morning, a jogger named Lila Henson stumbled across something strange. She ran the same trail every day, looping around the lake and cutting through the narrow path that led into the forest. That morning, she noticed faint footprints pressed into the mud, smaller than her own, leading off the trail. At first, she ignored them until she saw where they led. Beneath a tangle of roots, half buried under damp earth and moss, was a rusted tin box. The sight of it stopped her cold. Curiosity battled fear as she brushed the dirt away and opened it. Inside were a stack of photographs, old and water-stained, but clear enough to see the faces in them. One of the faces belonged to Emma Collins. The other was Tom Mitchell. When Ryan received the call, he was at the precinct reviewing reports. The moment he heard photos and Mitchell, he grabbed his coat and drove straight to the scene. The box contained nearly 24 pictures, Emma and Tom together at diners, motels, and once in front of the Mitchells' house when Claire was out of town. The intimacy in those photos erased any doubt. The babysitter wasn't just part of the family. She had been the other woman. In the station's evidence room, Ryan examined every photo closely. There was one where Tom was smiling, his hand resting gently on Emma's cheek. Another showed them laughing in a car, her head on his shoulder. It was clear they had been seeing each other for a while. What shocked him most wasn't the affair itself. It was the timeline. Based on timestamps, the relationship had begun nearly 8 months before the murder. Emma had been only 16 when the first photo was taken. Ryan felt his stomach twist as the pieces started falling into place. This wasn't just betrayal, it was exploitation. Tom had manipulated a lonely, impressionable girl, made her believe he loved her, and then discarded her when she became inconvenient. That explained the desperate tone of Emma's letter to Claire, and the haunting words she'd written. "I thought love made everything okay." He ordered another search of Tom's office and home. Beneath the pretense of cooperation, Tom looked nervous. He tried to play the grieving husband, the wronged man, but cracks were showing. When confronted with the photos, he paled. "She was obsessed," he insisted. "She followed me. She wouldn't leave me alone. I tried to end it." But Ryan had heard that line too many times before. "You tried to end it," he repeated, leaning forward. "And then your wife ends up dead. Convenient timing, don't you think?" Tom's jaw tightened. "You think I killed Claire? That girl killed her. She was jealous. She was a child, Tom," Ryan snapped, his calm breaking for the first time. "You groomed her. You lied to her. And when she found out you were never leaving your wife, she broke." Tom slammed his hands on the table. "You don't know what you're talking about." But Ryan did. Everything pointed to a confrontation that spiraled out of control. Emma's growing obsession, Claire's discovery, Tom's lies. It was the perfect storm. The evidence was circumstantial, but emotionally, it painted a clear picture. That night, Ryan revisited the Mitchells' kitchen again. The scent of cleaning products couldn't hide what had happened there. He stood where Claire had fallen and tried to reconstruct the scene. He imagined her walking in, rain dripping from her hair, looking at her phone and seeing one final text from Emma or Tom. Maybe she had found the photos. Maybe she confronted Emma first, thinking she was just a confused teenager. Then something was said, something that snapped the fragile thread holding Emma's emotions together. The sound of a door creaking broke his concentration. It was Officer Marquez holding a plastic evidence bag. Detective Forensics finished analyzing the fingerprints on the knife handle. Only Claire's and Emma's, none from Tom. Ryan nodded slowly. That confirmed it. Emma had held the knife. Whether in self-defense, rage, or panic, she had been the one to end it. But where was she now? The next day, a local fisherman reported something floating near the far edge of Willow Lake. The call came in early, just after sunrise. Ryan drove out immediately, his heart pounding the entire way. The scene was quiet when he arrived. Mist clung to the water, the air heavy with the smell of algae and decay. A few yards from the shore, rescue workers pulled a pale figure from the water. Even before he saw her face, Ryan knew. It was Emma. Her body was bloated from the lake water, her skin pale blue. She wore the same hoodie she had on the night Claire was killed. In her pocket was a damp, folded piece of paper. Ryan carefully opened it. The writing was smudged, but he could still read the words. "I didn't mean to take her from him. I just wanted her gone. I wanted to be enough." Ryan closed his eyes. It wasn't a confession of hate. It was a confession of heartbreak. Emma hadn't fled to escape justice. She fled because she couldn't live with what she'd done. The story that had captivated Maplewood was no longer about a killer on the run. It was about a girl destroyed by a man's lies and the guilt that followed her, until she drowned herself in the same lake where they used to meet in secret. When Ryan told Tom about the discovery, the man went silent. For a long time he didn't say a word. Then he whispered, "She was supposed to stop calling me." I told her it was over. His voice cracked. She said she'd tell Claire. I didn't think she'd actually do it. Ryan studied him closely. You didn't think she'd tell your wife, or you didn't think she'd kill her? Tom didn't answer. His eyes filled with tears, but there was no regret in them, only fear. He wasn't crying for Claire or Emma. He was crying for himself. Over the following days, the town went into mourning again. The Mitchells' house was sealed off for investigation. Emma's funeral was small, attended mostly by her mother and a handful of classmates. Diane Collins could barely stand as the casket was lowered into the ground. She was just a girl, she kept repeating. She just wanted someone to love her. Ryan stood at a distance, hands in his pockets, watching the rain start to fall. He'd seen too many tragedies like this. Young lives twisted by deceit, adults who should have known better using innocence as a weapon. Emma wasn't innocent, not after what she did, but she hadn't been born a monster. She'd been made into one. The final report would label the case as a homicide followed by suicide, but Ryan knew that was only half true. Emma had killed Claire, yes, but she wasn't the only one responsible for the destruction of that family. Tom Mitchell had destroyed her long before she ever picked up the knife. Weeks later, when Ryan drove past the Mitchells' house one last time, he saw that the for sale sign was up. The windows were dark, the yard overgrown. The life that once seemed so perfect had rotted from the inside. Maplewood was quieter now, but not peaceful. People still whispered when they walked by that house. Some said they'd seen a light flicker in the kitchen at night, or a shadow moving past the window. Ryan didn't believe in ghosts, but as he drove away, he couldn't shake the feeling that the house remembered. It remembered the lies, the betrayal, and the night love turned into murder. In the end, the truth had come out, but it brought no comfort. Emma's secret had changed everything. And for the people of Maplewood, the image of the sweet babysitter and the perfect family would forever be replaced by the memory of blood, rain, and the quiet sorrow of a girl who just wanted to be loved. The morning the fishermen found her, the lake was still and gray, the surface glassy under a pale autumn sun. The news spread through Maplewood faster than the wind. Emma Collins, the missing babysitter, had been found dead. After weeks of speculation, sightings, and theories, the story ended the way no one expected. Quietly, tragically, and without the neat resolution the town had hoped for. People gathered at the yellow police tape, whispering to each other as officers worked along the shoreline. Some said she'd been murdered and dumped there. Others that guilt had driven her to take her own life. Either way, the mystery that had gripped the town for nearly a month had reached its sad conclusion. Detective Ryan Hale stood by the water, his hands deep in his coat pockets, staring at the place where Emma's body had been laid on a stretcher. The medical examiner was finishing up, her voice low and respectful. Emma had been in the water for days, maybe weeks. The cold had preserved her longer than anyone expected. The letter in her pocket, addressed to Noah, was written in shaky handwriting, the words uneven as if written in tears. "I'm sorry, little one. I didn't mean to take your mommy. I just wanted her gone." Those few words told Ryan everything about her final state of mind. She wasn't running. She was punishing herself. The case file on his desk would soon be marked closed, but for Ryan it didn't feel finished. There was no satisfaction in it, no triumph. Just the heavy weight of a truth that felt more tragic than criminal. The town, however, saw it differently. To them, Emma was the monster who shattered their perfect suburb. To others, she was the victim of an older man's lies. Either way, she had become a legend, a ghost story whispered at sleepovers, a warning that evil could live behind any smiling face. 2 weeks later, the funerals came, one after another. Claire Mitchell's service was filled with flowers, news cameras, and sympathy cards. Tom Mitchell stood in the front row, his son clutching his hand, both of them dressed in black. His face was pale, hollow, but there were no tears. When people hugged him, he nodded numbly, saying thank you over and over. What no one saw was the storm brewing inside him. The guilt, the fear, and the endless replay of the choices that led here. Emma's funeral, by contrast, was small and quiet. A modest service in a church on the edge of town. Only her mother, a few classmates, and Detective Hale attended. There were no reporters, no cameras, no neighbors pretending to care. The priest's voice trembled as he read from the Bible, his words nearly drowned by the rain that tapped against the stained glass windows. Diane Collins sobbed into a tissue, whispering her daughter's name as if saying it might bring her back. Ryan stood in the back pew, hat in hand, watching as the casket was lowered into the earth. He didn't pray. He just watched, his chest tight. He remembered finding Emma's diary among her things, a spiral notebook filled with messy handwriting and teenage doodles. Between pages of hearts and sketches of flowers, the entries grew darker over time. She wrote about how Tom made her feel special, how he promised her the world, how he told her she was the only one who understood him. And then, the tone shifted. She wrote about the nights he didn't answer her calls, how he avoided her eyes, how she saw him and Claire together one afternoon and realized he was never going to leave his family. Her last entry was only 2 lines long. She doesn't deserve him. I do. After reading it, Ryan had closed the diary and sat there for a long time, the rain beating softly against the window. He didn't know if that was the moment she decided to kill Claire, but he knew it was when she started to lose herself. Maplewood tried to move on, but the shadow of what happened lingered. Parents who once bragged about the safety of their town now double-locked their doors and checked on their children twice before bed. Houses that once hosted barbecues and birthday parties now kept their blinds closed. The Mitchell's house went up for sale not long after, but no one wanted to buy it. Rumors spread that strange things happened there, that the lights flickered at night, that the baby monitor in the empty nursery still picked up whispers. Some said they'd seen a girl's reflection in the kitchen window, her face pale and wet, her eyes full of sorrow. Tom Mitchell eventually left Maplewood, moving with Noah to another state. But running from the past didn't change it. Every night when he closed his eyes, he saw Emma standing in the rain, her hair clinging to her face, asking him why. He saw Claire's blood on the floor. He saw his son crying, asking when Mommy was coming back. The guilt gnawed at him like a wound that would never heal. He started drinking heavily, his career crumbled, and within a year he was bankrupt. The scandal followed him wherever he went. He couldn't escape the truth, that his selfishness had destroyed 2 lives and broken his sons forever. Detective Hale stayed on the force, though the case haunted him more than he liked to admit. He'd seen murders before, but this one clung to him because it wasn't born out of greed or cruelty. It was born out of something dangerously close to love. He visited Emma's grave once more, months after everything had settled. The grass had grown back around the headstone, and someone, probably her mother, had left a single white rose. He stood there for a long time, the wind cold against his face. "You were just a kid," he murmured. "You never had a chance." The official reports would say Emma Collins stabbed Claire Mitchell in a fit of rage and then drowned herself out of remorse. But the unspoken truth was that the people of Maplewood helped create her. They saw her as perfect, harmless, incapable of harm. They gave her access to their homes, their children, their lives. Nobody asked what she was going through, what she wanted, what she was hiding behind that polite smile. The adults who should have protected her either used her or ignored her until it was too late. In the years that followed, people tried to forget. New families moved into the neighborhood, unaware of the tragedy that had once unfolded there. Kids rode their bikes past the old Mitchell house, now freshly painted and remodeled, their laughter echoing down the street. But those who had been there that night never forgot. Mrs. Green, the neighbor who made the first 911 call, claimed she could still hear crying some nights when the wind blew from the east. She'd wake up and swear she heard a young woman's voice whispering, "I'm sorry." Ryan eventually retired from the police force. On his last day, he packed up his desk and found the old case file. thick with notes, photos, and evidence logs. He hesitated for a moment, then slipped Emma's letter to Noah out of the folder and folded it into his pocket. He told himself it was to remind him why he did what he did, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. But deep down, he knew it was also because he couldn't let her story end as just another file number in a drawer. That night, as he sat on his porch watching the sunset, he imagined a different version of events. One where Claire never came home early, where Emma went to college and Tom faced his guilt before it consumed him, where no one died and Maplewood stayed the peaceful town it pretended to be. But life didn't work that way. Sometimes he thought evil wasn't born. It was made slowly through loneliness, lies, and a hunger for love that curdled into something darker. Years later, when people told stories about Maplewood, they always ended the same way. They'd lower their voices and say, "You can still see her, you know." The babysitter, standing by the lake when the fog rolls in. Some believed it, others laughed it off. But everyone, even those who didn't believe in ghosts, agreed on one thing. After that night, Maplewood was never the same again. Because the truth was, the horror didn't end with the deaths. It lingered in the memories, in the walls of the house, in the hearts of those left behind. And maybe that was the real punishment. Not the crime itself, but the way it changed everything it touched. The babysitter's secret had done more than take 2 lives. It had stolen the innocence of an entire town, leaving behind a silence that would never truly fade.